Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Brendan, by the way, and I wanted to welcome you to this free audio training on how to improve the sound in your films. Just so you know, this is a pre-recorded webinar, and the reason for doing that is because I've done this so many times and I've done it live, and it's just the worst. The internet is always crashing, or the app is always crashing that I use to broadcast these trainings, and it's just the worst. And the other reason for doing it pre-recorded, and this is more important, and that is I want to be able to see what you guys are saying. When I was doing these things live, I couldn't see all your comments. I couldn't see your questions, and that's just terrible. No one wants to be ignored. So by doing it pre-recorded, I'm able to sit on the back end. I can answer your questions. I can make sure that I see them all, and it's just better for everybody. So feel free to ask me anything. Type them in. Tell me where you're from. All right, and let's get going on this thing, shall we? So before we dive in, there are some questions that people always ask that I want to get answered right away. First question is, who is this training for? It is for filmmakers looking to enhance their video production by understanding how sound works and how to use it to make your film come to life, aka bringing higher paying clients. It's also for any filmmaker looking to understand audio better, whether you are just starting out in filmmaking or audio, or you're very experienced and seasoned. It's for any one-man band type of filmmaker who finds themselves doing a lot of commercial, interviews, weddings, action sports, etc., and often don't have the budget or ability to hire a sound guy for production or post-production. And of course, it's for those who feel like their videos are missing something, but they don't know exactly what it is. And guess what? Little hint, it's usually sound. Is this you? If this is you, type yes in the comments and let me know, because it seems more and more that big clients and big brands and people like that are expecting more from creatives, but they aren't increasing time or budget to get the job done right. So filmmakers are constantly being forced to do more things on their own. They're forced to wear more hats. The other question that I want to get out of the way before we dive in is, how long is this training going to be? How long, dog? How long is it? It's about an hour, and I'm going to be going pretty fast, so make sure that you are taking notes so you can get the most out of this. I want you guys to be able to learn, which is why I've put this thing together. It's not for me to just sit here and pitch my product. I've packed this thing full of information so you can learn, because I want you to learn, okay? Because I'm sick of seeing amazing films fall apart because of bad audio. I'm sick of it. I've had enough. And that is why I've made this training. So here's what we're going to talk about in this training. We're going to talk about me, how I got started, and how I got to where I am today. We're going to talk about the Filmmaker's Guide to Audio and why it was made. And we're going to take a peek into all of that and look at it. We're going to talk about the top 6 mistakes that filmmakers make when it comes to audio, and how that's ruining the quality of your films, causing you to not land the attention of higher paying clients. And then if you're okay with it, because I'm giving you guys so much free value in this training, I'm going to give you an awesome exclusive deal at the end for those of you who want to learn more beyond what's inside this free training. And of course, I will be answering some of my most frequently asked questions at the end. And with that, let's dive into this thing. So let me tell you a little bit about me before we get into the 6 mistakes that filmmakers make. I have had a passion for music and sound ever since I can remember, and I started really making music and putting it together when my brother bought some music gear when I was in high school, and I attempted to make music. I did the whole band thing and tried to do that, but a lot of people rejected me and said that my music was too weird and they didn't like it, and even my high school music theory teacher promised me that I would never find success in any way, shape, or form in the music industry. But I didn't let that stop me. I went to college and set up my first studio. There she is. She ain't pretty, but she does the job. And I worked on a lot of music and songs that I loved, and it was a lot of fun. And that semester at college, I met a guy named Scott. We hit it off. We had a lot of similar interests in music and movies, and it was an instant connection. And I left for a few years to do some service, and when I got home, I reconnected with him. And after reconnecting, and we ended up making a project about cats. And that video blew up. We were actually on set one day for this crappy commercial. I was running sound and he was shooting, and we just kept checking our phones. And it was like, 50,000, 80,000, 100,000, 130,000. And it just kept building up. And we were like, what is going on? And so within a week, this video hit 1 million views. And then we started getting contacted by other big YouTubers like Devin Supertramp and Grant Thompson from King of Random. And we started making music. And outside of making music for these guys, we started making our own videos and music videos. And we built up the channel Scott DW. And we were able to work with a ton of huge brands like Ford, Canon, Mattel, Macy's, Ubisoft, Virgin, Oreo, LG, and tons of other people. And on these productions, I worked as a sound engineer, a producer, a music composer, and I grew to learn what these companies expected when it came to quality. And since then, I've started a new venture with my really good friend Doug May, and together we've done sound design, mix, and compose for feature films, TV shows, commercials, and many, many other projects. And I've learned a ton about what is expected with big brands and clients. And I've also learned how much impact sound can have on a film, resulting in higher paying clients. And a big area where filmmakers are consistently messing up and losing potential big jobs is bad audio. Bad audio can totally degrade a production. And these days where it seems like budgets are being cut all over the place, you may find yourself needing to wear more hats. So instead of just knowing how to shoot, you're also expected to know how to direct, how to light, how to operate a camera, how to edit, how to color, and even how to deal with audio. And with people needing things done ASAP and quick turnarounds and lower than ideal budgets, you have a ton on your plate. You can't always hire out. You don't have the time or the money to do so. And for the most part, I feel like filmmakers excel at every area in these except for sound, which is unfortunate because it makes up so much of your film. In fact, George Lucas, you may have heard of him, creator of Star Wars, said, sound is 50% of the movie-going experience. And Danny Boyle, who did 28 Days Later, 127 Hours, and Slumdog Millionaire and other movies, thinks it's even more important. He said, the truth is, for me, it's obvious that 70-80% of a movie is sound. You don't realize it because you can't see it. So, the takeaway here, bad audio will ruin your production because these brands expect high quality. But what do you do when you're a one-man show? You don't have time to hire an audio guy because of the deadline, or you don't have the budget to hire an audio guy, or heaven forbid, you don't even know an audio guy. Have no fear, I'm here to help. Okay, get out your pen and paper. We're going to crack into this thing. Top 6 mistakes that filmmakers make. Here we go. So I've seen a handful of traps that filmmakers who do their own audio fall into constantly. So much so that I can immediately tell when someone has done their own audio that doesn't really know how to do audio. The worst hang-up I've seen with filmmakers who do their own audio is pride. People get so prideful thinking that they don't need to learn more, or to use reference tracks, or to hire an audio guy because they just straight up don't know what they're doing. Audio is an intangible thing. Like Danny Boyle said, you can't see it. It's not like an image. If an image just straight up looks bad, whether it's blown out, or the framing is off, or there's nothing interesting going on, pretty much anybody can immediately identify that something is wrong. The problem with audio is people have different perceptions of audio. People's ears are shaped different. Their heads are shaped different. And what they use to hear audio through, whether that's a phone, laptop, earbuds, bad home theater systems, sound bars, they all portray audio different because everything sounds different. There isn't a standard that people can reference. But with visuals, you can take a look at it next to another video or picture and immediately realize what's off about it. Sound, you can't as much, which leads me to my first top mistake that filmmakers make. Here we go. First mistake! It's assuming everyone else hears audio the same way you do. In your world. And what do I mean by in your world? Well, it's what we just talked about. It's a combo of pride, ignorance, and lack of training. People are prideful, thinking that they can handle it when they really can't. People are ignorant, thinking that audio doesn't really matter because it's the visual that matters. Again, remember, hint, it's half the experience. And third, lack of training. People just don't know what to listen for when it comes to audio because you can't see it. It's not something you can pinpoint, but often you find yourself feeling like something is off. So what can you do to avoid making this mistake? Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but first I want to give you an analogy and tell you a wonderful story. So how do you feel when people say they can't tell the difference between 4K and 1080? I mean, it's understandable, right? It depends on the material, it depends on if they know what to look for, but that's okay. Not everyone has to be able to tell the difference. Now imagine if someone said they couldn't tell the difference between 1080 or 4K and 360p. Now all of a sudden you're feeling a little bit baffled. You're going to start questioning this person's sanity. From a film perspective, people are making 4K videos, but delivering the audio in, dare I say it, 144p. And yes, that actually says 144p. So how would you feel if someone showed you a video that they were way proud of and insisted that you watch on your 4K TV, only to find out that they shot it in 360p and exported in 144? You would be shocked. Yet people do this all the time with audio, all the time. So, what's the fix? Use references. So what does that mean? It means get out of your mental editing cave, get some fresh air for your ears, and listen to something that's not what you've been working on. Compare it to a video in the same genre as what you're working in. So let's say you're doing sound for a commercial. It's an interview and music. Pull it up next to another commercial that has interview with music. How does it compare? Is it quieter? Is it more muffled? Is it too bright? Does it seem empty? Hollow? See, by using references, you get a real-world example of what things should sound like. Because chances are the video that you're referencing has been done by an audio professional, and they know how to cater sound to multiple devices. So if you can get your audio to sound comparable to theirs, then you should be in a pretty good spot. And I know this may seem like a no-brainer, but it's real, and it happens. Okay, now we don't have time to go in this webinar to cover all of the different types of sound problems and way to fix them, but I do go over all these tips in the full course covering things like manipulating EQ, compression, but hopefully this gives you an idea that you need to step outside, get a new perspective, and realize that people are going to hear audio differently than you are currently hearing on whatever you're editing on. So let's dive into our next filmmaker's mistake, which is capturing poor quality recordings, especially because of environment. Now you may be thinking, oh, come on, duh. Everyone knows that. I don't get bad recordings. I know what I'm doing. Now, whether you think that or not, this applies to you. This applies to you. We're going to talk about a few things in this area, so get ready. The first thing is environment. We're going to do a fun exercise that I love. So I'm going to shut up for the next 30 seconds, and I want you to do something, and that is listen. I want you to listen to everything going on around you. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, there's nothing going on around me. There is. There's a lot going on around you. There are so many tiny things that your brain is tuning out right now. This could be an AC, a dog barking, birds chirping, babies screaming, dinner burning, whatever it is. Soak it all in and listen and analyze. Here we go. Okay, what did you hear? Take that all in. That stuff you just heard is going on all the time. Our brains are very smart, and they are constantly tuning that stuff out. It's called background noise. And if your brain focused on background noise the same way it focuses on dialogue or a conversation, you'd go insane. It's way too much for your brain to take in. But guess what? Your microphone doesn't care whether it's dialogue, birds screaming, or a dog taking a whiz on a fire hydrant. It's all the same to the microphone. So this is the first problem people encounter when they are recording. They don't realize how much is going on in the background. And this is a problem for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, they get to post and they realize how noisy it is. They realize that the noise is almost as loud as the dialogue. And again, you may be thinking, well, this isn't me. But guess what? It very well could be. Remember that thing we talked about at the beginning? Pride. But even though cleaning technology in audio is getting a lot better, it still does not replace well-captured audio. So make sure that when you go to shoot or location scouting, you're always paying attention to your surroundings. Always. Because you never know what audio curveball will be thrown your way. Which leads me to the other thing that people are always seeming to neglect when they capture audio, which is reverb. Reverb! I can't tell you how many people are like, yeah, it's just, there's so much echo. I need you to take it out in post. It just sounds really bad. And it's like, why didn't you do anything about it in the beginning? So what is reverb? Reverb is basically when you make a sound and then it reflects. Okay, so up there on the far left, you've got your direct sound. And then there's a little bit of a delay, and then there's a tail. There's reflections, and then a tail. This is basically when you're in a big environment, and you clap, and it goes... That's reverb, because you've got your sound source, and then it's creating reflections off of a bunch of places. So, terrible places for reverb. Right here. Open ceiling house with a bunch of wood ceilings, wood floors, wood walls. Terrible. A perfectly flat, square room. Terrible. The audio just bounces everywhere. Okay? There's nowhere for it to be absorbed. And this is something that I feel like people don't ever think about, especially when they're location scouting. So I'm educating you as a filmmaker to be aware of acoustics and how they interact within a room. So if you're location scouting and you find a perfectly flat, symmetrical room that looks cool, think about the sound and how that's going to interact with everything going on in the room. So here are a couple ways that we can kill reverb. Furniture. Anything to absorb sound, like couches or blankets or towels. And honestly, anything that will deflect or absorb sound. Another thing to help out, people. The more people that are on set, the more it kills audio. It's great. I was on a film one time and they had built this whole scene, perfectly flat walls, and then it opened up into this ceiling that was a vaulted ceiling, but the vaulted ceiling was all way reflective, and so it was so bad. I did a few tests and I had my panels and blankets and I was like, this just still is not the greatest thing. But then once everyone got in there, the actors, the crew, it really tightened up. So, if there are a lot of people there to help diffuse, that helps out a lot, which leads me to my next point, and that is creating angles with random objects. The way to prevent reverb is you block these flat surfaces from reflecting, because the more flat area there is, the more places it has to bounce. It's kind of like light. If light has a bunch of clear windows, it's just going to keep going through those windows. And that's kind of how, when a sound hits a flat surface, it's the ideal surface to bounce right off. So a 4 flat walled blank square room is terrible because there are 4 perfectly flat walls that this sound can just bounce everywhere. But if you have angles to break it up, it'll help diffuse the sound. And diffuse is basically like throwing an object in front of light or whatever it may be. So one of the best ways to do that, other than the things that I've already listed, obviously, are sound panels, because they're used and designed to absorb and diffuse sounds. So I made a couple of those. So here's a few pictures of those. And the nice thing about this is if you have C-stands, you can throw them on the C-stands and kind of create a box around these people. And seriously, it will blow your mind how much of a difference this makes. A little goes such a long way. And if you don't have extra C-stands, like one time I was on a shoot, kind of an interview spot, and we were in this tight, cramped room, but it still sounded terrible. What I did is I took these panels and I just laid them on the light stands, and it just really tightened up the sound and made it sound nice. And if you don't have these, throw down blankets. Throw blankets under tripods, under C-stands, under light stands, beneath the actor's chair, or if it's a walking scene, you can map out where the actor is going to walk and place blankets on the ground. You will be blown away at how far this stuff goes. Because if you can do whatever you possibly can do to treat the reverb before you get to post. Because seriously, I have cleaned up all types of things. I've cleaned up traffic, planes. I've cleaned up a little kid yelling straight through someone's dialogue. But reverb is one of the hardest things to clean up and make it sound natural. And one of the biggest reasons it's hard to clean up is because of something called the signal-to-noise ratio. So we've talked about our background noise, we've talked about reverb. So what is signal-to-noise ratio? What does it mean? What does it mean? So this is our signal. The thicker blue blobs are our signal. And right here is the noise floor. So in a nutshell, the noise floor is the amount of background noise going on. It could be the self noise from your microphone or your preamp. Okay, that's the noise generated by the unit itself. It could also mean your AC. It could also be a Dodge. It could also be that neighbor that you hate that's always yelling at his wife. Whatever it is, it's noise, and it's getting picked up by your mic. So all of that stuff falls into what I would call the noise floor. So what you want to do is try and keep your noise floor as quiet as possible compared to your signal. So this could mean turning off the AC, turning off refrigerators, shutting the windows, shooting your neighbor's dog. All of these things would help. So if you're recording talent who's whispering or their voice is more quiet and timid than Piglet, so what are you going to do about it? Well, the number one thing to do is get rid of all the distractions and noises that are in your control, aka everything but the self noise. If your unit has self noise, that's inevitable and you'll have to deal with it in post. But the things like all the devices that you could turn off or whatever, that is in your control. And I'll often do this with talent. If the talent speaks really softly, because, there's some people that just simply talk quiet, I'll tell them, hey, you need to speak up a little bit louder. And a good actor will know how to increase their volume without changing performance. So the things that are in your control, you need to direct. So direct your actors or your interview people, make them talk louder, because if you don't clear that noise floor, you're going to be kicking yourself in post. Now, of course, we've only touched lightly on this whole subject. There's a ton more that I cover extensively in the course, like how to deal with wind, how to clean up scratchy audio. But hopefully this gives you an idea of some of the biggest things I see. And because reverb and noise floor type things, those are the biggest issues that I see filmmakers running into with their recordings. Which, of course, leads us to the next filmmaker mistake: not recording at the right levels. This one is massive. People either record way too hot or they record so quiet because that they're afraid that they're going to clip. But the problem with recording too quiet is you'll run into what I previously mentioned called the noise floor. It's what makes up the noise in your background. People are always saying, well, what level to record at because so-and-so said this and whatever blog recommended this. Let's clear up the confusion. Average levels, -18 to -12. Peaking at -6. So we're going to use the Zoom H6 as a readout here. So this is where you should be averaging your levels. Average means, the way I'm talking right now, and then I go louder, and it's like you're averaging around there. And then your peaks are the loudest that your audio will go in. So if someone's talking quiet, then they go, hey, and hey, that's a peak. So you want to make sure your peaks are not going above -6. So here's my challenge to you. Will you record at these levels from now on? I need to hear a resounding yes. Will you record between -18, -12, peaking at -6? Yes? And just so you guys are aware, these things happen to audio professionals too. I was once working with an engineer who was recording an album at my studio, and he was recording everything way too loud. And he said it didn't matter when I told him to turn it down. Well, turns out he recorded the whole thing too loud, and I had to spend a bunch of time going through and declipping all of it, which didn't even sound good, and it took a bunch of my time had he done it right the first time. There was another time where I was on a film set doing audio for the job shadow video that's in the course on how to do audio for a wedding, And we got everything mic'd up perfectly. Everything was going great. We had the groom mic'd up. We had the pastor mic'd up. We were tapped into the mixer board. Everything was going great. And then all of a sudden, the audio system went haywire. Everyone jumped. Dogs ran for the hills. Birds scattered. Old people were yanking out their hearing aids, bleeding, saying, "What in tarnation?" So in a panic, we're like looking around. The bride was already on her way down the aisle. We didn't even have time to mic her up because she was still getting ready, right up until the wedding started. So as the ceremony was going, I just ran over and threw a Zoom right next to this lady, and it was on the ground. It was using the XY mics that were built onto the Zoom. Not ideal at all. It was about 30 feet away from the speaker, so, I wasn't getting a good signal-to-noise ratio, and it was terrible. But you know what? It ended up being a really good example to teach you guys, because it's like, that stuff happens. Accidents happen no matter how much preparation you do. And so the way I fixed it was using 3 techniques that I will teach you in just a minute here: EQ, compression, and noise cleaning. That's all I did. And I just had to massage it and really try and separate that noise and signal ratio to get the best sounding audio that we had. Now, of course, all recordings will be different because of your microphone, your signal to noise ratio, like we talked about, aka how far away you are from your subject, but also things like the type of device you're using to record, like a camera preamp versus an external preamp, like a Zoom, the type of microphone effects, how you need to mic things and where to place microphones. For example, you can't just throw any microphone on the ground and hope it'll sound good. Now, we don't have time to cover all of the stuff that there is to know about recording in this training, right? Because there's things like different microphones, preamps, how to mic people, where to place microphones, all that kind of stuff. Recording is one of my favorite subjects, and we don't have time to cover all of it right now, but a lot of people don't understand the basics of recording, which is just getting the right levels. And like we talked about, -18 to -12, peaking at -6, that will get you so far ahead. Now that we've covered recording, there's another part that ties to recording, which leads us to our next filmmaker mistake. Number 4, not using the stereo image to its full potential. Now, this applies to recording audio, and it also applies to the post audio. So let's first start off with a quick demo of what mono versus stereo recordings sound like. Okay, this is an example of dialogue in mono. Make sure you are wearing headphones or listening on good speakers. This is an example of dialogue in stereo. Notice how it fills up more of the spectrum. Now, so many people record dialogue in stereo because in a way it's perceived as sounding better, right? Quote unquote. Because it seems to kind of fill up more of your headphones or speakers. But guess what? It's not better. It's just weird and unnatural. Like, think about when you're talking to somebody. Are they talking right in front of you? Well, yeah. If you're having a conversation with one person, they're usually right in front of you. And that's how we perceive the audio. When the audio is mono, in the middle, in front of you, in one source, it's coming right in front of you. Whereas when people stick dialogue in 2 channels, when it's in stereo, this is how your brain perceives the audio. There's no source. So it sounds like it's coming from multiple areas, even though one person is talking. Now let's listen to a comparison between mono and stereo dialogue. I'm going to play the same clip, and then we're going to switch back and forth. Now listen, if you don't have headphones on, get some on right now. Hurry, run, go get them. Go get headphones. Hurry, run, 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 run. Okay, now that you have headphones on, notice in these clips how the stereo dialogue seems a lot wider and huger sounding, and the mono is more kind of down the middle. Here we go.
Now, the reason we're using this smartphone camera over others is because LG loaded the V. Now, the reason we're using this smartphone camera over others is because LG loaded the V. Now, the reason we're using this smartphone camera over others is because LG loaded the V. Now, the reason we're using this smartphone camera over others is because LG loaded the V.
See, so do you hear how when it's stereo, it feels like this, where it's like, where is that voice coming from exactly? But when it's in mono, it's like, oh, it's this person right in front of me. You can immediately identify who the source is coming from. Now, dialogue is almost always in mono, which means one channel or one microphone. So whether you capture a voice with your Rode mic, a boom, a lav, a condenser, whatever it will be, it'll be in one channel. If there's one cable plugged into it, it's in one channel. And in post, dialogue again sits down the middle of a mix. The only time I use dialogue in the left and right channels is when I'm panning, as if someone is moving in or out of frame. Otherwise, stay away from it. So here's a simple breakdown to help you remember. Down the center, which is mono, remember one microphone, is dialogue. And in your sides, you can put things like music, sound effects, that's it. If you stick to this rule, then you'll be fine. Now, you may be wondering whether or not your dialogue is mono or stereo. Well, like I said a second ago, if you captured with a lav mic, a boom mic, Rode mic, or whatever it may be, it's mono. If you captured your dialogue with 2 or more microphones, it's not mono, it's stereo. So, for an example here, you have the stereo Rode mic, you have the Zoom XY mic, and you have the Rode XY microphone. Those are examples of stereo. So what's one way to check? Well, when you get to post, solo out your dialogue. Is it coming more out of one speaker over the other? Throw on headphones and you will immediately notice compared to listening on speakers or a laptop. If the dialogue sounds like it's in the middle, right? It just sounds center, then you're great. If it's off to one of the sides, then make it mono. And as far as music and sound effects are concerned, just put them in post. You don't need to be worried about it because chances are they're already in stereo. So dialogue down the middle, music, sound effects, basically just don't even touch. And that leads to the next mistake. Number 5, not processing audio. You wouldn't leave your raw image for a video. You would want to do some color correction or color grading. It completely transforms the visual. You wouldn't upload your video directly without editing it. And the same thing with sound. Even good sound needs processing. And I can't think of a single time ever where I didn't process the audio in post, because no matter how good it was captured on set, it still needs a little bit of tweaking. So what does it mean to process audio? Well, like coloring, you'll need to make sure that you're using the right tools. And more importantly than using the right tools, knowing how to use them. So we'll quickly go over the main audio tools, which are EQ and compression. Now, before we head into this next section, we recommend that you listen on headphones or good speakers, aka not your phone or not your laptop. We'll give you a minute to go grab a pair. I bet you never thought you'd see this pic again. Yet here we are. So the first tool that we're going to talk about is EQ. EQ is your tonal shaper. Think of this like your levels tool in coloring. On the left hand, you have your low end, which is like your shadows. Think of it as the heavy part of audio. Your bass, sub, etc., those types of things. Those are just like the blacks when you're coloring. The low end carries a lot of weight, and the more weight you add here, the more headroom you're going to take up in your mix. Now let's move to the mid-range. Think of this like your midtones. This is where the bulk of the sound is coming from. Just like in color, if you mess around with this, it affects the overall feel of your image. The same with audio.
Shoot better in low light situations without getting too much noise in the image. It also has a 10-bit image sensor, which means it can
Have you ever noticed how when you mess with the midtones on a color curve, the whole picture changes? The shadows adjust the blacks, the highlights adjust the whites, but the midtones pretty much adjust everything. And that's the same thing with audio. The majority of everything, whether it's music, sound effects, and especially dialogue, hang out in the mid-range. So if you have too much or too little, it throws off your overall perception of the whole mix. So most consumer speakers are accented in the mid-range. So if it's off, it'll be noticeable. Then of course on your far right, EQ has the brights, just like your colors have the highlights. Think of this like your whites. In audio, there are T's and S's and any high-end information in a track. So just like whites in an image, pushing these up a little can bring a lot of life and vibrance to an image. But push too far, you lose contrast and the whole thing becomes bland and it's really harsh on the eyes. It's the exact same way with EQ. If you push the high end on an EQ too far, you can ruin the whole thing very quickly. So be very careful with this area. So it's just like when you're shooting. You want to look at your histogram so you don't blow out the whites. So with EQ, you don't want to blow out your high end. It's not pleasing to listen to and it's extremely fatiguing. And what I mean by that is is if your audio is overly bright, people won't be able to last more than 30 seconds before they're tired of listening to it and move on. Don't do it. So I want to do a quick experiment here. I'm going to play a clip of audio that's overly bright, and then I'm going to switch to a natural sounding piece of audio. Now, the biggest thing I want you to notice with this is you'll immediately think, again, hoping that you have good headphones and speakers at this point, you'll immediately think, wow, this natural one is extremely dark and muffled. But the reality is we've deceived your ears for so long with that really bright clip that your ears need to adjust. Think of like when you're smelling perfumes and you need to smell coffee beans to cleanse your nose. The same thing needs to happen to your ears. And that's why it's so important to use reference tracks like we talked about earlier in the training. Your ears need a refresh. So here we go. I'm going to play this piece of audio long enough for you to be deceived, and then I'm going to switch back.
Which is great for shooting scenic landscapes. It also has manual mode functionalities, so you don't need to buy any third-party apps in order to have full control over exposure, white balance, focus, and other settings. It also claims 11 stops of dynamic range and log recording capabilities. Okay, files, one thing I really like about this phone is it has the ability to add micro SD cards, so I can shoot all day long without running out of memory and easily...
See? It's very important for you to use reference tracks and get a taste of the outside world because your ears can quickly be deceived. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make. They push that high end and they're like, whoa, that sounds good. Then they push it a little more. Then 10 minutes later, their ears adjust and they're like, you know what, I could probably make it a little brighter. And then eventually they end up with something that's so bright and so fatiguing and it doesn't hold up in the real world. So don't do it. So the next tool I want to talk about is compression. Okay, so what is a compressor and what does it do? Well, before we go any further, I need you to understand that no, this is not compression as in you make the file size smaller. That's a different type of compression. This compression is referring to a tool used to squish audio together to level it out more, right? So say you have an audio track and it's like really high and then really low. This helps you to get it more even. So when people ask me, when do I need to use a compressor, bruh? Or, hey man, every time I use a compressor, it sounds worse. Or, so I know I'm supposed to add a compressor, but it just doesn't seem to do much. So I just leave it on anyway, just because you're supposed to have one. First off, you're not supposed to do anything. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So just like in film, if something works, go for it. If you have to stick a light and bounce it off of 5 different things, and that's what looks best, go for it. Having said that, let's go into my 2 criteria for when you would, quote unquote, need a compressor. Number 1, does your thing, whether it's dialogue, sound effects, or music, need to be more leveled out? AKA, does it seem to be like really loud, really quiet, and then it's really loud? If it's like that, then you may need a compressor. Like you feel like you're always having to reach for the volume knob and you can never quite get it to sound where you want it. So number 1, does it need to be leveled out? Does it feel like it's all over the place with volume? Number 2, does your thing, dialogue, sound effects, or music, need to cut through more? AKA, does it feel like when you turn the volume up or down, it seems a little bit too quiet or a little bit too loud, but you can't ever quite get it to be the right volume? For an example, like with a dialogue next to music, you know, a voiceover or whatever, you feel like when you turn up the volume with the volume fader, it's just like, it's too loud. So then you just turn it down a little bit, but then all of a sudden it's buried in the music. That's what I mean by cutting through more. If you answer yes to one of these questions, then yes, you'll need a compressor. So if you throw on a compressor just because your buddy here said to, then you can just back on up and get on out of here, okay? You can find the way out and don't let the door hit your butt on the way out here. Compression is a wonderful tool that can really enhance audio. It can make things clear, it can make things audible and right in your face, and it can also be used to completely ruin your audio. Yeah, okay. We all know, we've all heard it. It's getting old, Uncle Ben. But really though, this completely applies to compression, okay? It's a very powerful tool, so we need to use it wisely. Just because you're cranking on the compressor doesn't mean that it's going to sound quote unquote good. All right, so maybe you're wondering where you can find your EQ and compressor. Well, in Premiere, if you go up to this tab here, and you drop this little guy down, then you can find your effects under here. So I like to use the parametric equalizer. That gives me the most control over my bands. And then as far as compressor, I like to use the tube modeled compressor. So you may be wondering, what effects does a compressor have on something like a voice? Well, we don't have time to go into every single parameter here, but one thing that I like to do is start with a preset. So in Premiere, I like the voice leveler preset, and then that kind of sets us up on all these parameters that we can choose from, and then we just mess with our threshold. It's like really soft, and it acts as a great windscreen as well as... So notice how it's kind of grabbing those peaks here. So basically what this knob is this is saying, okay, once the audio passes this level, then I want you to kick in the compression. And remember, compression is squishing audio together. So look down here at these peaks, and then see how these are kind of valleys. These are a lot lower than these peaks. So what that's doing is that smashing this here and bringing these guys up. And so this is important to know because when you have a bad signal to noise ratio, it's raising your noise floor as well as bringing down these peaks. So make sure that you get quality recordings. All right, so let's listen to a compressor when it's overdone. As protecting against clothes rubbing. And last but not least, we have the Rycoat undercovers. What's cool about these guys is they help with wind. So what do you do for a healthy compression level? Well, I like to aim between 3 and 5 of gain reduction. All right, so let's adjust our threshold so we can hit around -3 to -5 right here. And last but not least, we have the Rycoat undercovers. What's cool about these guys is they help with wind, and they also help with clothes movements. So basically it comes in a pack, and you just tear off a little piece like this, and it has these sticks. So see how that kind of warms it up and levels out the whole audio. Now, we don't have time to cover all these parameters on this training, but in my course, I cover all of these things very extensively, and we talk about how to tweak it so it sounds really nice with your audio. Now, of course, I'm really only scratching the surface here for sake of time. I could talk about EQ and compression for hours and show you hundreds and hundreds of examples. But again, for the sake of time, I'm only able to briefly touch on it here, but I cover a ton more in depth on the course. Okay, but these tools are so paramount for you to turn around your audio. So getting a good grasp of how they work is key. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, drum roll. The number 6 top mistake filmmakers are constantly making is not realizing that you can do 80 to 90% of what a professional audio engineer does. Now, before you think you never need to hire a sound guy again, there's still very much good reason to hire a sound guy. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the majority of people doing weddings, interviews, voiceover type gigs, interview with music type commercials, etc., those types of videos can do 80 to 90% of what they hire me to do. Obviously, there's a time and place for Transformers type sound design. So that was a video that Doug and I did sound design for, but for the majority of wedding videos, real estate videos, action sports videos, and simple interview with music videos, you can do 80 to 90% of what I get hired to do. And to top that off, the other thing that people don't realize is that when they hit me up to work on something, I almost always start around $500. And like I said, for one-man shows, people doing weddings, simple interview commercials, etc., I'm almost always doing EQ, compression, and cleanup. And if you would learn how to apply EQ and compression, you could be saving yourself hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per project. And that's a lot of money going back directly into your pocket. Now, of course, if you're going to do crazy sound design for a video, or there is audio that's beyond your abilities, hire an audio guy. Becoming a sound engineer is a career shift, so I'm not encouraging you to become a sound engineer. But for simple cleanup, fixing, mixing, tweaking, sweetening, you have the tools built into your video editor to do the majority of what I get hired to do for these types of videos. The most common mix jobs I get hired to do for filmmakers are balancing out dialogue and music, sweetening the sound, and cleaning up noisy audio. Now, balancing dialogue, that's addressed with volume. Balancing dialogue and music, that's a combo of volume, EQ, and compression. Sweetening the sound, EQ, and compression. Fourth is audio cleaning techniques, which, of course, we don't have time to go into right now, but that is something that I cover extensively in my course. So real quick, let me show you a few examples of those. So I'll just start and I'll have a title on screen of what I'm doing. Balancing dialogue and music, sweetening the sound. So here we go.
Wow.
I love the term cartoonist.
Stop motion artist.
A rap to this.
I always felt like an imposter.
Who are my characters and what are their deepest fears? What's trying to stop them?
Wow.
I love the term cartoonist.
Stop motion artist.
A rap to this.
I always felt like an imposter.
Who are my characters and what are their deepest fears? What's trying to stop them?
How do I look? We got it.
I felt empty. I hadn't found my physical and mental limits. It just came into my head. 50, 50, 50.
50 Ironmans, 50 states, in just 50 days.
I felt empty. I hadn't found my physical and mental limits. It just came into my head. 50, 50, 50.
50 Ironmans, 50 states, in just 50 days.
Feeling that already. It's nice to know Division 1 has the budget for the good stuff.
Is it true you were referred to as Weapon APOC in Division 7?
Feeling that already. It's nice to know Division 1 has the budget for the good stuff.
Is it true you were referred to as Weapon APOC in Division 7?
Feeling that already. It's nice to know Division 1 has the budget for the good stuff.
Is it true you were referred to as Weapon APOC in Division 7?
So you just learned in the last 30 minutes how to address 75% of those problems. And by understanding how an EQ works and how it affects audio already puts you miles and miles ahead of almost every filmmaker I've ever met. Understanding these basic concepts will make your work stand out from others in a massive way, resulting in higher paying clients and more returning customers. And the thing that people always forget with sound is that when it's done properly, the production value quadruples. And it's not always the audible things that people hear, it's the things that they feel. If you change the way your videos sound, people will feel the quality of your work and it will stand out from everyone else. And like I've said, we don't have time to go into every single thing to know that there is about how to do audio for your videos in this training. So before I start answering my most frequently asked questions, I want to show you what's inside my course, The Filmmaker's Guide to Audio, what it includes, what it looks like, and what you can expect from it. So it's got over 60 videos, and it's always growing to meet your needs. So the content of the course starts all the way from the gear, like what microphones to use for your individual setup. I go over the classic debate of speakers versus headphones, and when you'd want to use each one of those. I talk about field recorders, microphone patterns, when you'd want to use what type of microphone, what software you'd need, and I also show you what I use to give you an idea of what's inside an Audio Guy's gear bag. And if you want to look at these, here is a link to my kit page where you can see the gear that would work best for your setup. So I've spent hundreds of hours researching audio gear, and I've spent probably even more time hanging out with filmmakers, and I know what you guys need and what you don't need. So I don't know about you, but I've bought so much gear that everyone on the internet said, you have to buy this. But I ended up buying it, and it just sat in a box and rotted to death. So I don't want you to end up in that position. So I've spent time going through and making sure that it's stuff that you as a filmmaker would need to improve your audio. And that's why I've divided the kit pages out into individual setups. So that covers the gear section of the course. The next section is the technical section of the course. This is where I go over the most common mistakes of audio, which are things like how to deal with non-ideal environments, how to use, place, and hide microphones to get the optimal placement and sound quality, including tips for boom and lav and how to clean up messy audio. I dive a lot further into EQ and compression, using extensive examples and real-world scenarios like matching different interviews to sound the same tonally, how to balance music with dialogue in depth, how to make sure that your content is the right loudness so it doesn't get turned down by automated systems like YouTube or other broadcasts. I then go into audio cleaning, which is a huge one. There are a handful of things that I constantly see filmmakers running into, and we address all those, like cleaning up an air conditioning or a hum in your audio, cleaning scratchy lav audio that has clothes rubbing against the mic, declipping audio, cleaning audio that was captured with an onboard camera microphone, and even how to make your ADR sound more believable. And the funny thing about sound cleanup is I get hired to do this all the time. And if you can learn how to do this, you can start making yourself some pretty good money. I usually charge around $400 starting per job. So it's because a lot of people don't know how the cleaning works, how to do it properly. So I teach you all of my methods, all of my tricks and tips on how I get my audio clean. And these have taken me years to learn through trial and error, learning by mistake. So I want to save you guys the time and the hassle of learning by mistake so you can know exactly what to do right out the gate. And then we hop into sound design. I cover a few basic things like how to layer sounds, how to choose them. I also talk about the process of building out a sound bed and how that can really bring life to your film. I also have a virtual jobs shadow section where I go from beginning to end in real life applications of all the things that you've learned throughout the course and how that applies to specific situations like doing commercials, doing wedding videos, doing real estate videos, action sports videos, etc. And like I said, I'm always adding to the course, and one of my favorite things to add is students' problems. So like if you're going through a problem and it's like, hey, I'm really struggling with this issue, chances are if you're struggling with that, then others are as well. So it's a great teaching opportunity. We both learn, we both get to go through the problem together, and you can see how it applies to you directly. Plus, as a bonus to all of the videos, one of the best ways to really learn something is by having a mentor. And I have had the opportunity to mentor a few people, and they've been able to grow at like 100 times the speed that I was able to. So I'm here to be your mentor if you need help with anything related to sound. Send me an email. I want to help. So if you have questions or you have a tough clip that you're struggling with or you can't quite grasp a concept or whatever it may be, I know the value that it can have just to brainstorm with someone else and say, hey, what can I do to make this better? So I'm here to help you out. But even more valuable than me helping you is the peer mentoring that goes on in our private Facebook group. It's full of filmmakers and audio engineers. So you can be confident that either someone is going through what you're going through, or you're getting professional help from other audio engineers who do this as a living. And because this is a school, I'm able to get anybody who joins the course a discount on the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite. And with that student discount, you can get 60% off, which is an annual savings of $360. It's an amazing deal if you're already using any of the Adobe products for editing video or photography like Premiere or Photoshop or Audition. So this discount alone will pay for itself by joining the course. And again, because it's a school, I'm able to offer 50% off of Red Giant products, 10% off of Rhino sliders, and 10% off of glide cams. So the savings that you're getting from joining the course are already paying for themselves upon joining. I will also throw in 20 free slow motion sound effects. People always seem to be looking for slow motion sound effects, so I'm tossing those in as well. So there you have it. The lifetime membership includes over 60 in-depth training videos covering everything you need to know to become your own in-house audio engineer. And I'm always adding to that. Plus, I'm here to be your personal mentor, and you get access to the community where there are other filmmakers and audio engineers there to help you with your troubles. Plus, I've got the virtual jobs shadow where I take you behind the scenes of jobs that I'm actually working on and showing you how these principles and techniques apply in the real world. Plus, the student discount on the Adobe Suite, which saves you $360 annually, and also the Red Giant, Glide Cam, and Rhino discount. And honestly, the whole reason I even built this course is because I'm so passionate about audio, and I cannot stand to see amazing films getting ruined by bad sound. I know how hard you guys work for your films, and I know how much work goes into making a film, even a film that people say is a small-scale film. every single film, to me, every single idea is worth creating. So therefore, I believe that every idea should be shown in its best light. So I don't want your ideas, your stories, your dreams, your passions to be held up by lack of access to an audio person or lack of knowledge. My goal is for you to make higher quality films by improving your audio, helping you land higher paying, more consistent clients, and saving you thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars by learning how to do your own audio. And by learning and applying the techniques I teach in the course, you will end up making money because you won't have to hire out audio jobs that you are now doing yourself. I get requests all the time to clean up audio and mix audio, and I charge between $400 and $500 for one single clip. So the value you're spending here to learn how to do what I do in a basic cleanup and mixing is more than paying for itself if you were to hire me just one time. And on top of all of that, the content in this course covers what a couple semesters at an audio school would cost you, upwards of $55,000. And if you were to go to an audio school, it wouldn't be catered toward you as a filmmaker. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, for those of you who have stuck around for the full training, I'm offering an exclusive discount to join the course. So the program is worth over $4,000, but I don't normally charge that because the regular price I charge for this program is $799. But as an early bird special, while the school is still building up and in its infant stages, I'm offering it for only $497. But for those attending the webinar, the first 5 people to join in the next 20 minutes get an additional 25% off, making the total only $397, which is half of what I would charge to do audio on one single project. So all you have to do is click the link that I'll provide in a second, and once you click on that link, it'll take you to this exclusive webinar discount page. You click on the buy button, set up an account, and then you'll see the 25% discount already applied. So without further ado, I'm going to give you the link to that offer. Okay, here is that link. All right, so like I said, you have 20 minutes to take advantage of the discount. And again, we only have 5 coupon codes available with that discounted price. It's a first come, first served basis. So if you're thinking about joining, now would be the time to do it. And for those of you who use the Adobe Suite, remember that you get a student discount giving you an annual savings of $360 off of your Creative Cloud subscription. So just by signing up, it's more than paying for itself on top of everything else that you get. Okay, so while that 20-minute timer is going, I will be answering my most frequently asked questions. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. If I don't answer your question with my voice, I will try and answer your question in the chat box, so pay attention to both. Okay, here we go. First question is, why would I buy this when I could find tutorials for free on YouTube? That's a great question. You could go on a hunt through the internet and find tutorials on YouTube, of course, but from personal experience, you are going to be sifting through a lot of nonsense. Plus, the biggest issue I've found is consistency. I feel like I find one tutorial that I like from somebody and then the rest are not that good. Or I find a tutorial that I like from someone else, but they only have 1 or 2. And I've gone the YouTube route and it is painful. I spent years trying to find out what I needed to know. And even after all of that, most of the tricks and techniques that I use today is all stuff that I've had to learn the hard way by doing it with trial and error. I don't want you guys to have to go through that. I understand that you have a life. I understand that you don't have time to sort through all the nonsense or try and guess what you should remember or what's just fluff. That was my biggest thing. I didn't know what I actually needed to know, so I tried to soak in everything and it was just overload. So I've made Filmmaker's Guide to Audio a full comprehensive course that teaches you what you need to know as a filmmaker. Okay, because I've been working in the industry for years on all types of film sets. I've been in all types of jobs on a film set, doing everything from pre-production all the way to post-production, and I know what knowledge is essential for you to know. If all this course does is save you the hassle of hiring an audio guy for post on one single job, it would pay for itself, almost twice. And I promise you, that if you study what's in the course and apply what I teach, you will be able to engineer more than one of your videos, and it will be killer. Okay, next question. how do I boost the volume of raw audio? So there are a few ways to do this. You can either turn it up with the mixer in your video editing software, or you can use what is called clip gain and adjust the individual clip's volume. So you can do this by either double-clicking and seeing what the gain is, or in Adobe Premiere and Final Cut X, you have a line through the middle of the clip, and you just basically click and drag that up to turn that up. But what's interesting is a lot of issues that people run into with volume increasing or decreasing is because they don't record at the right levels to begin with. But you now know how to do that. As far as dealing with bad audio that's just too quiet to begin with, now that you guys know what to record at, you will do a lot better. And of course, there are a few other tools that you can use to boost volume aside from just, volume, like a clip gain or whatever. You can use a compressor. You can use a limiter. A limiter is basically a compressor on steroids. Think of it like scissors for your audio. You set a threshold of where you want it to activate, and then it will basically clip off everything above that threshold. It's a great way to increase loudness in your audio. So use gain, use a compressor, try out a limiter. Those are all things built into your video editing software. Are there certain audio tools that are better than others? Well, when it comes to software, yes and no. For hardware, I would say yes. Generally, the more you pay, the better it's going to be. It's the same with camera gear. But with software, for what you guys are most likely going to be dealing with, the tools built within your video software is going to do the job and do it pretty well. And of course, if you want to invest money in more audio tools, something that I would start with is called Isotope RX, which is an audio cleaning program. And I've been using RX since version 2, and it has honestly changed my life. So if you're looking for something to clean audio, Isotope RX is the way to go. If you're looking for better sounding, quote unquote, audio tools like EQ, compression, those kinds of things, you can look into brands like Slate Digital, or Isotope has great stuff. Or my favorite EQ that I actually was using on screen during this training, it was that purple one when we were talking about EQ and how it compares with your levels tool on adjusting the picture color. Remember that one? So that one is called the FabFilter Pro Q2. It's super smooth, and it is just seriously a joy to use. But the question remains, are these tools arguably better? Well, again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Like I said, for the majority of work I've got from filmmakers who do weddings, interviews with music, commercial type things, corporate videos, real estate videos, action sports videos, the plugins are built into your software. But if you feel like you want to buy something, Isotope RX would be one of the first ones. Next question, how do I match different microphones? They sound different when I record. For example, lav and boom. Yeah, this question people ask all the time, and I think the answer is twofold. For the sake of example, let's do a video with a series of interviews where you have different people being interviewed. So the first part of the answer would be try to get your audio to sound as close as you can to what you want when you're recording. So for example, say you have to use a lav for an interview that you're doing right now because the background is too noisy to use a boom. So you have that lav buried under someone's shirt and it sounds a little bit muffled. But the interview you captured yesterday for the same project, you're going to use the boom because it sounded a lot better. So what do you do here? Well, for interviews, one thing that I like to do is if it's a medium or a tight shot, what I'll do is clip the lav just below the frame on the outside of the person's shirt. So that way it sounds natural. You're not dealing with clothes rustling. You're not dealing with muffled audio and running wires through people's shirts, which gets annoying. So do what you can to make it sound as close to the boom as possible, which a boom, for a refresher, sounds like how your ears pick up dialogue, which is natural, airy, and clear. So if this isn't a possibility and you have audio that's muffled, that's where part 2 of this answer comes in. So part 2 to this question is, do it in post. I know that's the worst phrase ever, but I mean, that's kind of what we have to deal with. So you would go in post with this clip and tackle it with some EQ. So by now, you should understand the effects that EQ can have on audio. So if it's muffled, boost the high end, like we talked about earlier. Will you boost the high end to make it brighter? If it's too heavy or bassy, you can cut out some of the low end, which in turn will actually make it sound brighter. You don't even have to boost the high end. So once you've got your dialogue EQ'd out, how do you match it to your boom? Well, what I like to do is edit the video. Then once I know what order the interviews are going to go in, then I will set a loop point and listen to the dialogue that I'm trying to fix. And I'll work at it with EQ. And then I will actually go and reference the boom audio to the next interview or previous interview to make sure that I'm on track. So in this case, you're referencing your own audio as a reference track, and that helps you match each clip with each other. EQ is going to be your best friend here. Okay, so the next question is about the Filmmaker's Guide to Audio. If I buy it, will I get lifetime access, and will I get access immediately? Yeah, you'll get access to the content for life, and anything else that I add in there, you will get for free at no additional cost. It's just this one-time upfront payment. You pay it once, and you move on. And the best part is you can go back and watch these videos as many times as you want. You can move at your own pace. You can watch whenever you want, so it will always be available to you. And yes, of course, you'll have immediate access to the content. The site is really simple to use, so once you create your account, your videos will always be hanging out there for you whenever you need them. How do I reduce room hums? Oh, that's another great question. So that's something that I specifically cover in the course, but there are a few things that you can do with tools that you should already have access to built within your video editing programs. And one of the main tools that you can use is called a de-hum tool. Adobe has that built into their suite. Final Cut has the same thing. It's called hum removal. So that would clean it up really fast. Now, what if you're working with a program that doesn't have a de-hum? Well, you can then move to de-noise module. And what you'll want to do there is highlight some of the background noise where no one is talking, and then you'll have the tool learn that noise profile. Then you can apply that to your dialogue. So it's important whenever I'm capturing audio, I always make sure to have a little bit of handles on my audio files, either at the beginning or the end. And you may have heard the term grabbing room tone. It's the same thing, right? You want to make sure that you have a little bit of leeway that you can bridge audio gaps or learn noise profiles. Now, what if you don't have a de-hum or a de-noise program? Well, the next option would be using, you're never going to guess, EQ. So what you do with an EQ to get rid of a hum is you do a low cut, and you cut out the rumble of your AC or your machine humming or whatever it is. You know what? That's why I always say, make sure you get good recordings because it will help out in the long run. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, next question. How loud should I make my videos? Oh man, well, that one is kind of a loaded answer. And I cover this topic specifically in the course to help you know what you should aim for, depending on the type of material you're working with or where you're delivering. But the biggest problem with loudness is the fact that it's an ongoing debate with no specific solutions. And I'm not going to go into that right now because people have made seminars and 10-hour courses on just the subject of loudness. I mean, it is a deep rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. But to answer in the simplest way right now, I would go back to what I recommended over and over throughout the training, and that is use references. You're probably sick of me saying that, but that's what it's all about. References help us get a real-world check on what's going on. So there are some target loudness levels to hit, but it depends on the material you're working with and what medium you're going to be broadcasting to or uploading to. So we're not going to go into those specifics right now, but use references. And if you're having trouble getting your audio louder, do what I said earlier, grab a limiter and bring up your overall audio. That's something that I cover in the course, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea. Just a reminder, that timer is still ticking. So if you're on the fence, snag that bad boy. You're gonna love it. Next question, what program do you use to teach in the course? I actually have optimized the course so I teach as little as possible using any specific editing software. I've made it more about what you're actually doing rather than, okay, I'm going to click on this, That being said, I do use Adobe Premiere when I am teaching out of a video software simply because the majority of members all use the Adobe suite. So I found that that's most relevant to teach out of for the software-specific tutorials. But that being said, I've done everything I can to make sure that everything I'm teaching is universal. So in the case where you use Final Cut Pro or another software, I do have an extensive background in editing in Sony Vegas and also in Final Cut Pro. So if for whatever reason you have a hang-up, I'd be more than happy to help you out. How do you properly cut music? I can't figure out how to get a song to fit my edit. For example, songs are usually 3 to 4 minutes and my edits are 60 seconds. This is a really common thing. And with songs, the biggest thing to remember is that they have tempo. So just like your edit has a feel to it, you can kind of feel when you need to cut or whatever, a song has a locked feel, right? It follows a very specific grid. So if you just chop in the middle of this grid, the whole thing will feel off balanced and weird, which will result in some pretty upset artists. Because remember, just as much as you are making art with your film, people are letting you use their art with their music. So when you hack it up and make it weird, it makes them angry and upset because you're, messing with their art. So what's the solution to this? Well, there are a couple solutions. And one of them is to find the tempo of the song that you're going to use or that you're using, download a click track of that BPM, beats per minute, which is that obnoxious clicking metronome that you've probably heard at some point in your life, and then edit to that. And then you can pop in the song, and that will help you edit to the grid. And then you're not guessing where the song is having its downbeats. But what if you can't find the tempo or you're not sure? Next move I suggest would be to tap your foot to the song. And it should have a groove that will make your head start bobbing. Even if it doesn't have a beat, it has that underlying rhythm. And that groove that you're bobbing your head to, those are the downbeats. And that's where you're going to want to cut. Again, if you cut in the middle, you'll throw off that groove. So if you find yourself still struggling with this, get a friend or a second set of ears, especially a person with a music background. Those are often best to ask for this. And see what they think. Say, hey, here's a song edit I'm doing. Does anything feel weird? But as far as taking the emotional story that a song delivers in 4 minutes, you need it to deliver that same story in 60 seconds. So what do? Well, before you dive in and start chopping the song, listen through the whole song, take notes, write down what sections you like with specific time code markers, and then figure out how you can apply those to your edit and make sure that you have a little bit of slip room in your edit. Because I edit videos and I compose music, and I can tell you right now, it's a million times easier to slip and edit a few frames or even seconds than it is to cut at a weird spot in a song. So by mapping out what you like in a song and where you'd like things to hit before you lock your edit, you'll be in a better position. Now, what about movie trailers or things where you need sharp cuts? Well, in these cases, use sound design and fades to your advantage. So try and find bass hits or hard drum hits or even explosions to help you accent hard hits and dramatic moments in your trailer. These big hits will help you cover up weird cuts on songs if you have to cut at an abrupt moment. So once you've got your sounds in there, a thing that I will always do is use fades on the audio to help bring songs in and out so it's not super harsh coming in or out. So for example, say there's a big drum swell in the song, but by cutting it in where you want that drum swell to go, it feels weird. It starts on a weird spot. Well, try fading up to that drum swell. Stick in a sound effect of a reverse crash cymbal. Reverse crash cymbal. Write that down. Then cut off the music with a loud drum or bass hit or explosion. Trust me, it's great. It's dramatic. It's gonna get the feels going. You know what I'm saying? Kind of a long answer, but I'm passionate about that one. Love music. It's in my blood. Okay, follow up to that question. Where do you find good sound effects? Oh man, the hunt for good sound effects never ends. Well, there's a lot, but a site that I've found myself using a lot is called Audio Blocks. And it's really cheap. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crap on there, but a lot of the sounds can be tweaked and they're really useful. So look into that if you haven't heard of it, audioblocks.com. Also, if you're an Adobe Cloud member, you get over 12 gig of sound effects for free. So again, that's included with the membership to become a student for the Adobe Creative Cloud membership. So that also comes with it. And here's the best part. Now that you know what levels to record at, go out, buy a friend lunch, and go record some Foley sounds to use in your projects. Get traffic noises, nature, birds, lakes, streams, parks, malls, restaurants, whatever. It's a fun activity, and then you have a bunch of stuff for your library that you can use in the future. Trust me, those things are so handy to have, especially if you find yourself doing action sports, weddings, real estate, etc. If you can just capture like, oh, okay, well, I'll get 10 different environments that I'll use in all my videos. Oh, I'll get a bunch of people chattering. And then that way, when I do a wedding video and I add in sound, then I can just stick in that chattering and it feels nice and full. It's the best, okay? Grab your recorder, record at healthy levels, and get some sounds. Next question. If I have a specific question, can I email you? Yes, I'm here to help. Send me an email, brenden@audioguide.co, BRENDEN @audioguide.co, and I will help you out with any questions you need, which again, to me is what separates this from an experience you'd have hunting for YouTube videos, and that is having personal access to a practicing professional who can help you overcome your stumbling blocks. So hopefully I've been able to answer most, if not all of your questions. If I missed any, feel free to email me your questions. Again, that's brenden@audioguide.co, and I will try to respond to those as soon as I can because I am all about teaching and helping, so don't hesitate to reach out. Also, if you have any doubts or concerns about whether or not this course would be right for you, send me an email and let's talk about it. I truly believe that you can get a lot out of this. So if you're having questions or hesitations, hit me up and let's go through them. Okay. The offer has officially ended. So all of those who procrastinated, or if anyone is having payment issues, hit me up again at brenden@audioguide.co if you guys still want that discounted price, and we will get you taken care of. So with that, I bid you a farewell. I hope that you've been able to get some good value out of this training. If you guys want to follow me on socials to waste your life away, you can follow me at Brenden. By the way, I post a lot of face swaps and I do live videos about water bottles. So it makes for a good wasted time. It's fantastic. I wish all of you the best of luck, and I hope that you are able to accomplish your goals and dreams, and if there's anything I can do, please let me know.